Hello everyone, welcome to the Bitcoin Nostr Digest with me, Ben Ark, and today Simon is away, so he's not going to be joining us, but we are joined by our esteemed colleague, Jeff G, from the Nostr world and landscape. I'm going to be asking him a couple of questions on the current sort of state of affairs in Nostr, the things he's been building, the things that he's working on. From the very beginning, actually, you've just been pumping out great projects and content. So Jeff G, I think I first came across you with Nostr.how and all the great educational content on there. And then obviously now you're working on white noise and you're working on the and other stuff. What is and other stuff? Could you break it down for people? Well, we'll start there.
Yeah, let's start there. So, yeah, it's good to chat again. And other stuff is a group, sort of a federated group of us, a bunch of builders that have gotten together with, some funding from Jack again, really with the focus of trying to build other stuff projects on Nostr that really push forward adoption. So I think there's been, a lot of various projects on Nostr so far. A lot of that's been funded through OpenSats grants. And I think the way I've kind of looked at this is I think OpenSats has been amazing for really broad, experimentation across the ecosystem. They've funded every, type of project imaginable. And on the other stuff side, the focus is obviously other stuff. So it's not the social platforms. It's certainly not like a, Twitter replacement client. But we're looking specifically at things that enable groups because we think that's probably the best and most important category of stuff that's going to help bring new users into Nostr. And instead of working in a real disjointed fashion, the idea here is put a couple of folks together that have, a lot of experience building projects and building things, put them together and give them the remit and the resources and say, listen, build something together instead of just, a bunch of different experiments and see if you can actually, put together something super high quality in the way that a VC funded team would build, but without the VC funding. So it's not.
Is this going to be?
Yeah.
Is this going to be work? Are you going to be working on white noise through this? Is that part of it?
Yeah, so that's definitely part of it. So the way we've thought about this is a little bit, it's like organized around pillars. And so we've got private communications as a pillar, we've got communities as a pillar, we've got commerce and money as a pillar. And then we've got sort of this, broader pillar, which is UX and research and design type stuff. So that one's one that sort of definitely crosses all the bounds. But the idea is that if you're going to build something for communities, there's lots of different variants of what communities need, right? There's public communities, there's things like Discord servers, there's Reddit boards, and then there's private communities, which can look everything from, Slack or all the way down into just direct messaging. And so cutting across all that, yeah, white noise fits into that, but white noise is sort of a slightly separate project, which is being helped along. And the underlying technology behind white noise, which is MLS-based messaging on Nostr, will obviously be then used across all the projects that we do and other stuff.
Just break down MLS messaging for people because it's really there's a good reason to be excited by MLS.
Yeah. How many hours you got? This is a digest, so we'll have to do the high level.
I don't know, the elevator pitch, as they say.
Yeah, exactly. So MLS is a new protocol. It's an Internet Engineering Task Force standard. It came out almost 2 years ago at this point in its final form. It is a new group encryption standard for how to do group messaging in a really efficient way. So it builds on top of a lot of the concepts that were introduced in the Signal protocol, namely things like using kind of hybrid public key cryptography and doing ratcheting, this double ratcheting system where the keys are changing constantly to give you post-compromise security and also forward secrecy. The issue with Signal protocol has always been large groups. In the Signal protocol, when you are in a large group of people and you send a message, you're actually individually encrypting that message to every participant in the group. So that scales linearly, and as you can imagine, as the group size gets really big, that breaks down completely. MLS uses a binary tree structure, and because of that, can do things, log in. And so the efficiency of the group gets way, way better while still retaining all of the post-compromise, security and forward secrecy properties. So it's a really exciting protocol to build on top of. It handles a lot of the really low level encryption and authentication aspects of it. But as a protocol, it's very agnostic in terms of how a system that's going to use that MLS is going to deal with delivery or with identity. And so the trick for what I've been working on for the last year or so was how do we take that encryption protocol and apply it to Nostr's decentralized relays and public-private key pair identity system. And there were some tricks there to make that work really well without leaking metadata. As you know, that's been a major problem with direct messaging on Nostr since the beginning. But we did figure out how to make it work, and it's working brilliantly. So the idea here is that we can have a interoperable, highly secure direct and group messaging system that runs over standard Nostr relays without any extra work on the relay side, and completely hides all metadata about who's in the chats and what they're saying.
You dissing my NIP4 right there, aren't you?
I was going to leave it out, but if you want to bring it up, we can.
I always like to remind people that I was just making a Twitter clone, and then I said, Twitter has DMs. That might be cool, mightn't it for you, Jeff? And he was like, no, I hate DMs. I was like, yes, but other people quite like DMs. And I was like, let's just make something really simple with really simple encryption. And then for years after, I would have to hear all these podcasts of people complaining about how bad NIPO4 was. And it was like, yeah, we made it in a day. And it was because there were 10 people in a Telegram group, and we were building like this clanky...
It's actually still better than Telegram, because Telegram is mostly like just plain text. There's no encryption in Telegram by default. So it's still better.
There we go. And this is actually, talking about Telegram, this is the thing which makes me most bullish on white noise is it's Telegram with better encryption than Signal, essentially.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say it's better encryption. I'd say it's comparable encryption, but it's definitely the efficiency of the groups, the way the groups can work, the upgradability of groups over time. You get a lot of really cool, very modern stuff out of MLS.
So, like Signal would struggle with a group of, let's say, a couple of thousand people.
Yeah, badly.
That's important because, like, the LM Bits group, that's got like 2,300 or something people. And a lot of these projects do. They have like 4,000, 5,000, 3,000, 2,000 members in them. So it is important that you have these group spaces. And I think this is why a lot of developers we still use Telegram day in, day out. It's just because you have these big groups of people who you can chat to. And it is kind of a go-to for a lot of developers. I'm always on Telegram. Most of my groups are on Telegram. So, but obviously I'm aware of the shortcomings of Telegram, and then also, how those shortcomings, they seem to get worse over time, and Telegram kind of gets more of a sketchy place to be over time. So I very much embrace, how many users has Telegram got? It's one of the most used chat messaging platforms. It's billions. It's like I think it's like 4 billion or something. It's like half the planet uses.
No, I think it's just shy of 1 billion if you count like monthly actives or something like that.
Is it?
The last time I looked into the details, it was like WhatsApp was, almost 2 billion.
Okay.
And this is like monthly
actives.
Excited.
So. Yeah, it's not it's not half the world's population. But still 1 billion people is a lot of people. And then if you can have a drop-in replacement which has encryption, and gives you that same Telegram experience where you can have thousands of people in a chat, and then you have that permissionless development. Because this is something I'm really bullish on in Nostr, which I don't think gets enough credit, is being a permissionless development environment. You can build bots and stuff. So like one of the successes of Telegram was it was always quite easy to build stuff for, like build bots for, build a Lightning wallet for, build whatever for. And I feel that you can have similar in something like white noise. So and other stuff, will it be producing, I suppose, once you're past the research period, will you be producing one project, or will you be producing a collection of projects?
Yeah, it's definitely a collection of projects. Like I said, the group structure is sort of a federated thing. And so, each of us have our own projects that we're continuing to work on, like white noise. It's just that, in most of the cases, like Kale and I especially, we're working at a lower kind of protocol level. So, all the cashew stuff really applies in a lot of different places. But anything that he does over there can strengthen what we do in other stuff. Same with the MLS messaging. I'll continue to build white noise as a very specific chat client that's hopefully going to be, the most secure chat client out there. But there's lots of pieces of MLS that you can use in slightly different ways, or at slightly different, security levels that will be used in different projects we work on. So yeah, we'll
That's cool.
definitely,
So like the best
yeah,
practices from each discipline, will you'll kind of like absorb it and
absolutely.
be able to
Yeah.
share your skill set. That's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like, the idea here is by putting ourselves together and really focusing on one or a handful of projects, we want to be able to build something, consumer grade experience for users that really pushes the boat on, how do we get normal people to understand uh, cryptographic key pair sign in? How do we get normal people to understand, Zaps and Bitcoin, and, how to do payments inside of an app like that? So I think there's a lot of white space there for, people to go deeper on some of these things. I think we've gone extremely broad with, like I'm saying, with, OpenSats driven projects and things like that. And we've gotten to do a lot of interesting things that way. But I think that we are not figuring out how to bridge that gap to users that aren't going to understand some of these technical concepts, and like don't want to spend the time to understand it. But we want to
Yeah,
get
and
them
there is
on
like
board.
there's always that inherent risk with any grant that if you're not for profit and then you're not, I mean, you obviously you care about getting more users and having more people use your platform, but if you're going through kind of a more of a grant way of generating some revenue so you can work on the thing rather than for profit, then you haven't got those typical for profit motivations that you would have to acquire users, customers, and then by making that as broad as possible and by your UI being a little bit more friendly for the average user. I mean, it's a different approach, isn't it, to building solutions for people by them being backed entirely by grants, and it is something which I'm kind of aware of because we get an OpenStats grant, but at the same time, I do think it's quite important that some of these projects have some for-profit services because you're then having to cater to the kind of the wider audience, the wider user base. And if we were to rely entirely upon grants, then there would just be less of you're less motivated to kind of work on that stuff. So no, I can see why why OpenStats just funding everything and all the projects in Nostr might result in a large portion of the applications clients being less user facing. Not that
Yeah.
they're not important projects; they're all important projects, and actually quite a lot of them wouldn't require much to get to that point where they were more user facing and more appealing to the average user. But yeah, no, it's nice that you've kind of got like a focused group, and then you want to build something which is like more market ready for the general people who aren't
Yeah.
nostified yet.
Yeah. I think you're right. I mean, like the sustainability of projects is important, right? We can't just continue to hope that we've got donors like Jack, handing out funds to us. And I think a big piece of that is starting to find those larger markets. I think most of the projects we're working on right now are not, super profit driven, but it's definitely in the back of our minds that, we need to be thinking of ways to make this sustainable over time. That said, like it is very much an open source, ethos in the project. We're building things that enhance human agency, make people freer and have more choice. And that's really what we want to focus on. So, the group stuff, the community stuff, I think is the logical, first place to go. We built an app in a week just before the Oslo Freedom Forum there about a month ago and launched it on the main stage on the first day at the Freedom Forum. And that was entirely coded with AI in 4 days, 5 days,
Wow.
by the group of us. And that was, I mean, mostly an experiment to see if that was possible.
Yeah.
And then two, an experiment to see, like, could we give an app that was, a little bit less techie focused to a group of people that aren't that technical. Most of the folks that attend the Freedom Forum are not Bitcoiners and Nostr folks. They're actually people that are just interested in human rights. Um, and it actually went really well. Like we got loads of great feedback. We saw lots of places where people were confused about things. We saw where, the community's nip that we had sort of used to do this stuff fell down. And so it was a really good kind of first toe in the water to make us go, okay, yeah, we're on the right track here. We want to redo what we did and build it in a way that's going to extend a lot of this stuff. But The idea
Yeah,
here is
I
give
to-
people a way to organize, right?
yeah, I mean, I totally agree as well. So, like with the with Nostr.com, the focus group of Nostr.com was just my father-in-law,
Nice.
and about 6 months ago. So I hadn't sat down with a normal person and just said, right, go through the process now and see if you can sign up to Nostr via Nostr.com. Um, and it's bonkers. It's crackers that we're building all this like freedom technology, and that there's no focus groups. It just relies upon people saying, "Hey, can you take a look at this to us?" So we should have a more concerted effort within the community to run some focus groups with people who aren't Nostr users, and then just get
Yeah.
them just watch how they respond to the onboarding and then to the different clients as well. Because
Yeah.
it's an extremely rewarding thing to do. So like my motivation for doing it was he signed up to Blue Sky and he's telling me about Blue Sky, and I
There
don't
you
like to
go.
talk shop too much when I'm with the father-in-law, but I was like, oh, we are working on this other thing which is cool. You could go have a look at. And then he was trying to do Nostr.com, he just couldn't do it. So that was my focus
Interesting.
group. And
Yeah.
then more recently
Interesting.
with the updates, I was like, I got him sat him back down in front of it and said, can you do it? And he's like, you could kind of get through it, but I mean, it still
Mm.
needs a lot of work.
Yeah.
So no, it's great yeah, for some people to be aware that needs to be kind of formalized a little bit more.
Yeah, I fully
Um,
agree. I mean, we did one of the things that we were doing in Oslo at the Freedom Forum is we spent through the days and the afternoons doing user testing for white noise with anybody that we could rope in to come in and give us 10 or 15 minutes. And we did it with about 20 different people, and it was really fascinating. It's like a punch in the face every time you do UX testing with users because it's like, but the button is right in front of you, and they just are like going back and forth to different screens, and you're like, it's right there. Why don't you just hit the button? But it's great because you get to see live and in person how people are actually using the thing versus how you think they should be using the thing.
yeah, and to go back to another point as well, like I think sometimes there's this idea that you have open source and you have proprietary. One is closed, one is open. Whereas within just software on the internet, there's lots of examples where you've got successful companies which are attached to free and open source projects. And I actually think it's a very good model because you have this natural check on your decisions for any project because you have this free and open source community. And if you annoy them too much, they're just going to fork off and do their own thing. So you're there to support that community of users and community of developers. And if you try and co-opt the software, or if you try and push in a direction which doesn't benefit the majority of the people, then you're just going to be shooting yourself in the foot. And I think it's actually a kind of a nice check on decision making, and it makes it easier to kind of focus on decisions when you couldn't just do whatever you want with a piece of software, that you are actually beholden to this user base of people. And there's there's plenty of examples of it, from WordPress to Odoo
Yeah,
to Ubuntu to a Blockstream, whatever. Like there's a bunch of examples of that running in the wild. And I would like to see more of that in Nostr, more people kind of setting up successful. I mean, this is how we have a sustainable ecosystem, isn't it? Is we have successful companies, successful free and open source projects, which are very active, and not being completely reliant upon there being a few very wealthy and thank God generous
generous folks.
benefactors.
Yeah,
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 exactly. But no, I mean, if you can come up with a decent Telegram replacement, more with every couple of days, I get a message from somebody, some great developer friend or whatever of mine, who's saying I'm no longer using Telegram, I'm gone.
yeah.
Um, and
That's
it's
a
not
good
because
thing.
they don't like the experience; it's just because they don't like
No, it's because they're terrified of it.
as well. They should be, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, we're getting really close on white noise. The hope is actually that we're going to launch on Friday this week. We've, based on that feedback we got in Oslo, we've done a bunch of changes. I've been spending a lot of time kind of taking the proof of concept code that I had in the initial app and pulling that out as library code. So we now have kind of Nostr MLS as crates on the Rust Nostr set of libraries. And so those are, very well built out, libraries that are abstracted properly so that any Nostr developer on Rust at this point can use those to build MLS messaging into their apps. So that's the exact crates that White Noise will use. It's the exact crates that we'll use with the And Other Stuff group when we get to this point. So this has always been the goal here is like, this is not just building an app, this is building all the tools necessary to make sure that every client in Nostr can upgrade to MLS messaging pretty smoothly and easily.
Yeah, yeah. So this kind of brings us around to the adoption topic, which I wanted to cover with you, which is, I mean, obviously this is how we increase adoption, isn't it? Is we make our stuff ready for normal users so they can access it, and that's important. But then there is also part of me as well where I think you've got to kind of, knowing how great Nostr is and how it's inevitably going to be successful, I'm just kind of making the most of it being quiet at the moment, because when it gets much more attention, it becomes a much louder place. So at the moment, the community is very small, and that's kind of I quite like when you have a new protocol. We had it in Lightning for a while, where it was a relatively small community of people building and users, and then as it gets bigger, you do lose something. You lose kind of I don't know, yeah, the kind of the quaintness of it or something.
Yeah.
So I'm just enjoying it while I can, because I know obviously this thing is going to be a success, because it is possible to do all the things which you're doing with and other stuff to make it more
Yeah.
user friendly.
For sure. And I think the world is kind of waking up to privacy and things like that. Like I was in America last week, and I saw these billboards on bus stops that Apple, was talking about the Safari browser, and it was like Safari, the only browser that's truly private. And like, it was a huge campaign. Like you saw these things everywhere in the city, and it was just really interesting because it was, it was kind of a moment of like, oh, actually, this is part of the zeitgeist right now. Like people do care more about privacy these days than they have in the past, and they're starting to wake up to the fact that big tech and now AI owns them completely, top to bottom. They know everything about them. They generally know more about them than they know about themselves in a lot of cases. So
it's
I think,
also the level of control in which you're empowering these corporations to have. Someone
right,
like Elon, when he like makes the algorithm lean in a certain political direction ideologically, it just makes people aware that how kind of controlled we all are, and that although a corporation may say this is a free speech platform, you can't see the algorithm they're running. You can't see like what relationship they have with the government of the country where they're registered. And more and more people are becoming aware of it. And as I sent you this article just before the show about Brazil, and how they've changed legislation in Brazil that actually these big corporations like X, like Meta, are now responsible for what their users post, which is I hate all attacks on free speech, but there's part of me which kind of rubs my hands together, because I think, well, this is why we're building something like Nostr, and some of these problems are solved by Nostr, and it can't help but push users towards something like Nostr, which is generally good for them.
maybe, maybe not. I mean, I think those attacks on speech, like it's a weird situation because, you want to see, some of these major centralized platforms getting their fangs taken off of them, or not being able to just own everything outright. But at the same time, laws like that can be used against open source developers and say, well, we treat you like Google, and like since you made a product that like people chat to each other on, like you're now liable to moderate the whole thing. And you're like, well, we don't have servers, we don't have anything in the middle, we can't moderate anything, we just literally release open source software. But you can't count on governments to understand that. So I think there's definitely some danger in that for sure. And I hope that the way it goes is, they can say, with clarity, the people that have the data and are, do have these centralized services, they can be held liable for certain actions. Maybe, I don't know. I'm kind of a free speech maximalist, so I have a hard time getting behind any sort of law like that. But
yeah, I'm the same. But I'm also I think a lot of free speech is an illusion, which is just kind of granted to you by the state in which you live in, and it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be something which is granted to you by this benevolent dictator of free speech. It should be something which you take control of and you own yourself. And with this latest Brazil law, I think that the thing they could possibly target would be relays for relaying certain information. Say, well, you're responsible for what the people are publishing there. But that's the whole point of Nostr, is it's easy to connect, to just spin up a relay in a different jurisdiction or whatever, or spin up relays for short periods of time. So it kind of solves the attack vector which the Brazilian government's trying to get in on this. And these corporations are vulnerable to it because they are this centralized body, this centralized authority.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when I think about, Signal and white noise and like what we're kind of competing against with MLS, like there's a similar dichotomy there, which is, I actually think Signal is probably a good actor here. I don't think they're, selling data on the side or anything like that. But Signal has three kind of main things that are against it. Like one, it's a US based foundation, nonprofit. So it's a US entity run by a CEO that also has a $50 million a year operating budget. And so if any of three of those pieces come off, or break or, are compromised in any way, we lose, the one and only very strongly encrypted messenger that we've got. And so it's like, that's not a world I want to be in, which is we're sort of dangling by this. Can Signal raise their money every year? Is Meredith compromised or not? Don't think so, but, you never know. And yeah, they're based in a jurisdiction that sometimes flips on itself and decides it wants to persecute things like this. So I don't know. It's like one of the main things that I think about of this is like, how do we build tools that are really unassailable because they are just software running on a phone somewhere?
I mean, it's certainly a platform which you would want to compromise. I mean, more recently, obviously in the news cycle, you've got the president talking with his chums on Signal and using Signal. Yeah. Obviously, whenever there's a point of central control, people are going to try and subvert it. And whether it be through blackmail or just, I don't know, paying someone off, like historically we've been shown that it's when there is a central point of control, central point of failure, like that will be attacked and it will fail and someone will take control of it. So it's very much important that these platforms, these international communication platforms, are commons, aren't really owned by anybody. We can all operate on them.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's precisely how we've set up White Noise. It's a nonprofit. It's literally has no backend servers. We don't have to run relays because, relays are commodity. You can connect to any of them. You can connect to many of them. And so there's nothing stored anywhere except for on your phone or on your computer. And then, things are relayed through the relays, but that's, double encrypted in most cases with absolutely no metadata attached.
That's really great. Well, we try and keep these shows short because it's the working man's little podcast, which they can pick up on what's going on in Nostr and Bitcoin. So we try and keep them to under 30 minutes. So we'll probably have to close it up there. But very much looking forward to White Noise being released on Friday. That's really exciting news. Congrats.
Yeah. Thank you much, Ben. You've been one of the early proponents and supporters of the whole thing, so it's been really awesome to have you in the corner.
I feel like it could be a killer. I mean, there's many killer apps, but I feel like this really could be one of the. I know you always you don't want to be,
yeah.
But I feel like it might be one of Nostr's killer apps. Yeah.
I hope so.
The world needs a Telegram which has high level encryption. So yeah, it's good stuff. All right, thank you very much, Jeff. Nice to speak to you again, buddy.
Yep. Take care, Ben.